Okay. Perfect. Yeah, it over here. Your function that's. Yeah. What time do you start? Yeah. What's the budget? Yeah. I'm sure she'll get it. Alright. Yes. The systems this year. You're ready. I was set it up. Someone hasn't raised today. It's okay. Excited. No need to put it up here. There's no need to put it in that. I'm gonna. I see that it's going on. So it's in the transition. You told me that I was. Are we recording? And are we live now? Okay. We can quiet down. We're gonna get started with our. Oh, yeah, quiet down. Sorry. You're just fine. Hey, folks in the back, can we just quiet down a little bit? We're gonna get started. Okay, we are going to call to order our March 18 steering committee of elected officials meeting. The time is 9:03 a.m. Rhoda, can you just confirm how many board members are present and participating?
We have 10 members.
10 members, okay, thank you. And so that is a quorum, although we've only got one item that we'll actually be taking the action on, which are minutes. So with that, we will move into public comments. And I do have a couple of sheets here. If there's anybody online who wishes to comment on something that's not laid out on our agenda, and the agenda is on the screen, please go ahead and raise your hand. And if there's anybody present who didn't fill out one of these, who does want to comment again on something not on the agenda at this opening point, please grab a slip or maybe just raise your hand. I can call on you now. I think I've only got one here that it's debatable whether it's a UGA or the opening, so I'll just let them decide. But this is for Bonnie Mager, referring to Cheney's readjustment. You got it, but I should have said folks who come down here and speak into the microphone, that'd be great.
I don't speak very loudly, so I know I'm in the microphone. I'm Bonnie Mager. I live at 15220 West Dairy View Lane in Cheney. And I'm here to support Cheney's desire to adjust, not to expand, but to adjust their urban growth boundary. So to include the property that we have been trying to get in since basically 2019, we've been working with the county and the city to create a neighborhood development by members. And Cheney has a difficult time because most of their urban growth boundary that's left to develop is south of the railroad tracks, which creates a lot of problems. And I know they want to put more land than just our 10 acres, but we have been approved by both the city and the county planning department, or planning commission, excuse me. And would just like to put in my 2 cents that we need land to accommodate the growth that Cheney wants. And really able to grow south of the railroad. And, this would be a great development, so, just here to support that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so very much. And then I'll just read off the names of these others, but I do think that they're more probably appropriate for later on in our workshops. Darren Watkins, housing allocations, Peter Hogan, housing allocations, and Eric Lowe, UGA boundaries. So unless you specifically wanted to maybe comment outside of, yes, is there a hand?
Yes.
Okay. I can't see it.
Are you able to call us?
Are they unmuted?
If I go out and talk, they'll show that they're not muted.
You think it's orange or their
Not sure. I think it's their end because they do have confirmation that our visual and audio is the outside.
Are they able to call in rather than virtual? There's no number. Okay, well, if we can maybe just see if they can log back in or something, give that a shot. In the meantime, is there anybody else? If not, we will just hold on that. We can come back to that comment and for the sake of time, I will turn it over to Scott to go into our first workshop, the PIS update and impact.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One kind of point of order, I guess.
Yeah,
There is a telephone number and a passcode in the legal notice that was printed, and maybe if Ronan could put that phone number and passcode in the chat. Perfect. This person could see it and try to call in. That, you know, if we can't get it, we'll, you know.
yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me, really the first two items are sort of overlapping here. The EIS process for the county is underway. Our consulting team is working on that. We're looking specifically right now at transportation modeling for the study areas that were identified over the last year in the UGA analyses. We're anticipating that work to be done in April. We're hoping to be able to publish finally a DEIS for full public comment by the end of April, if not a little bit sooner. That kind of brings up the UGA itself. A large part of that EIS was focused on existing growth within the current UGA. That would be alternative 1, as well as what we call alternative 0, or the no build or the no action alternative, which factors into alternative 2 to some degree. Alternative 2 is the expand the land available to handle our growth. And within that, the alt 0 is the part that starts to look at the county's historic growth patterns over the last 20 years in terms of the type of structure, the type of architecture, the densities of that. That will inform the difference between alternative 1 and alternative 2. Alternative 1 again is being infill alternative, which we have previewed with you and our steering committee, that is creating a new zoning set of criteria for the county called neighborhood zoning, that are essentially more of a mandated, or at least encourage mixed use rather than simply separating uses in our current system. So all of that is factoring into the EIS, which makes it quite a bit more complicated than simply studying what we currently have. So we hope to have that back mid-April, and we will be previewing that with the public at that point, and it will certainly be something on the May and third part of this body as well. PTAC will get that for planning study as soon as it's available. And one kind of sidebar on that, we have our draft critical areas ordinance that we received from our consulting team, late on Friday. We're positioning that for internal review comments this week, doing that with our planning commission on April 9th. And then at that time, the CIO will go out ahead of the EIS for PTAC and agency review, later on. There or in mid-April. So pieces are coming together. Specifically related to the UGA, at the chairman's request, we keep this on as an item to generate public comment. There's nothing new to report on the UGA. The study area map is the one that has been out now for some time. It's on our web, under the UGA label. And a reminder on that, the study area map is a somewhat broad approach. It has a targeted parcel generally in the center of it, but with roughly a half-mile radius around that. Suggests if any one of those parcels continues to score well in terms of transportation, currency, capital facilities, and others, we will look at the environments around it for the simple fact that, well, if there is infrastructure there, how can we leverage the existing infrastructure for a bigger growth area? So that map has not changed. We're available for comment. We're certainly not able to add any or consider any new parcels at this point until we see the analysis of what's been done with parcels. Mr. Chairman, I'd be willing to stop it or to take the comment.
Okay, well, with that, I've got one that's very specific to this, and then if there's others who would like to speak, you can go there. But Eric, you wanna? Now. And for folks online, if there is a comment you'd like to make, please put your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. First, I want to thank Mr. Chesney and his team for all the hard work they've put into this process so far. Over the last year, I've attended every steering committee meeting, the vast majority of planning commission meetings, and a good chunk of the public outreach events. I found the planning department to be diligent and committed to a transparent and equitable comprehensive plan development process. You may remember me speaking previously regarding my proposed development, Cougar Cliffs, located in Lehigh Valley. My family has acquired this property over 6 decades, currently holding 165 acres total, 17 within the city of Spokane and 148 in the county zone urban reserve. This is one of the study areas that Scott referenced. My goal at Cougar Cliffs is to meet or exceed all the criteria Spokane County has set at once when it comes to new residential development. To me, this means a dense, mixed-use neighborhood center where car-free travel is not only possible, but encouraged for the entire neighborhood through people-first design, including a robust network of trails and bike paths and ample green space. It is my hope that as the city, county, and WashDOT complete the planned improvements to the US 195 corridor as laid out in the US 195 I-90 transportation study published by the Spokane Regional Transportation Council, that Cougar Cliffs can act as a natural anchor for transit service provided by STA, further reducing the need for an automobile for all residents of Lehigh Valley. As a longtime resident of Lehigh Valley, I'm well aware of the many existing infrastructure shortfalls and the resulting community concerns when it comes to existing and proposed development in the area. To that end, I've met with representatives from interested groups, including Lehigh Hangman Neighborhood Council, Eagle Ridge HOA, Spokane Riverkeeper, and Citizen Action for Lehigh Valley. In every meeting, I've made sure to listen to every concern and tried my best to address them. I do not view these interactions as one and done. Rather, I view them as the start of important long-term collaborations. Pre-development, especially at the scale with which I'm working, is incredibly expensive. So I've only spent money as we've seen progress in the UGA review process. My development team is ready to hit the ground running as soon as there's some clarity on whether Cougar Cliffs will move closer to inclusion in the UGA, including providing the county with hand-drafted and architectural renderings of planned building types, as well as updated site plans with planned road and trail networks, sewer, and on-site stormwater. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Is there anybody in the room who would like to speak to this specifically? Anybody online? No, no answer. Any discussion amongst board members?
It's and just. We're trying to help you.
You can speak up a little bit far enough from the microphone, or hard to hear us.
So our staff is kind of dependent on some of these decisions to decide what we put in our capital facilities planning. And so we're just hoping that the analysis goes quickly and that we can get a little more certainty on our end so that we can wrap up our plans. The timeline that we have and that's just how it is.
I share your sense of urgency more than I have. It's very frustrating that we have been delayed on this. And as chiefly in that we anticipated the transportation modeling to be something internally in concert with SRTC. SRTC ultimately didn't have the capacity to do that for the various groups, and so we had to backlog that into our consulting team. And that just caused a delay. So we seem to be moving on track again, and we'll get that to you as soon as possible. The county is also anxiously looking forward to some of the FBIS or the preferred alternative coming from the city, because we're of course looking at the same thing, infrastructure, capital facilities to support the growth. So we can both share that concern. We'll get things as fast as we can.
Scott, on that note, is there exists, I guess, at this time, a list of parcels that are just being looked at, analyzed?
They're on the interactive map. And so, yes, there's a list of what we call the center of the polygon. Those are the ones that are that are fit, being put into the transportation modeling system. But if they score well, then we run the modeling to look at the parcels around them to see if we can leverage that same infrastructure for more growth and just in core farms. Okay, but there is I believe there's a spreadsheet as well attached on the county website where they list the parcels. So if you can get it off of there.
Okay, if that exists, I know that's at least something that our planning staff are like to see. Other comments from committee members? Okay, not seeing any. All right, well, let's move forward then to the countywide planning policies. The first one is the targeted reconciliation for housing allocations. There is no action expected on this, but definitely want to have some conversation around the path forward. So I know we've got at least two folks from the community wanting to speak, so we'll start there. We'll start with Darren, and then Peter Logan, you are on that.
Thank you for this opportunity. I represent Spokane Realtors. And as you know, we keep a lot of proprietary data about housing sales and construction. And we're eager to share that with you whenever it's necessary, even broken down to your specific areas and jurisdictions. We're here today, as you know, we've been very positive about this process. We have recommended alternative methods for assessing housing needs. We've presented market conditions to talk about concerns that we have. And we've also talked to you about different approaches that we can take to figuring out what we really need for housing. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want our communities to be vibrant and growing. And we want to be able to do that with you in partnership. The challenge becomes this, is that the targets are wrong. The target process is absolutely wrong, whether you use the guidelines provided by the state, by Commerce, they're just not correct. We are very concerned, and this is where I came to testify today, that in fact, those numbers are now being adapted even lower using a proposal made from PTAC on an alternative scoring system. The reason why that's critically important is that because those numbers represent not only a baseline, but a 20% reduction in that. And let me remind you again that you are in a border war and are losing badly. Your community is leaving. Right? And if you don't believe me, ask anybody from Spokane Valley what I-90 looks like. Every day, those cars are going over there. And just this week, stage one of a 5,000 unit housing position is starting just outside of Post Office in Portland. Their goal is to hit 50,000 homes in that region in the next 5 years. We're talking about trying to get to a number of between 30,000 for the next 30 years. Do you want to win or do you want to continue to lose? Let's just put this in perspective for you right now. The Airway Heights, which is in the subject of some controversy this week, especially following a very strong letter that was sent to them regarding how they adapted those numbers, even though they conflicted with what the county had already approved. They are in the midst of asking for about a 20% reduction of what they need. Now think about this for a minute. Airway Heights, which is already about 6,000 homes under built, is trying to add 2,000 jobs with a $48 million grant that was awarded from the state, from the feds on aerospace. And so you've got jobs coming and no place to live. So what we're asking today, can we take another look at those adapted numbers? Because those numbers were set low. We want you to go back and we've sent you guidelines. We put together a thing called the Truth of Housing in Spokane County. Please take a look at those alternative methods and see the targets we've been talking about, because that's what's needed for a healthy, growing population. And realistically, Airway Heights, for example, is one of the last communities available to build housing in that target that we have all identified as what our community needs for what they can afford. And so we would just ask that, revisit that, and we're gonna lean on county commissioners in the world, please. You need to take a hard look at this, because those targets that you're being presented are not following the formulas as provided by the Department of Commerce. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Next up, Peter.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Peter Hagan. I'm the land acquisition manager for Hayden Homes. We're a private Northwest home builder. We've been building in Spokane for over 30 years. We're focused on bringing a home to the market area that the area median wage earner can afford. We're here to ask the committee to reconsider the revision to the GMA housing allocation and to reaffirm the originally calculated allocation that was recommended and approved by PTAC, the steering committee, and the Board of County Commissioners for January 2025. Due to the timing of the revision coming so soon after the original allocation, it has created confusion and introduced a level of uncertainty that is now being carried forward into the long-term planning decisions for the county and is being used by local jurisdictions for their planning and comprehensive plans process. The revised allocation shifts approximately 6,000 housing units away from areas with demonstrated capacity for growth and into locations that face significant development constraints, particularly outside of the urban growth area. This revision is in stark contrast from the core principles of the Growth Management Act, directing growth into areas where infrastructure, services, and planned density can support it. Aligning housing allocations with those principles is critical not only for compliance, but for ensuring that the housing we plan for can actually be built. From a home building perspective, feasibility matters. Housing targets must reflect real-world conditions, land availability, infrastructure, market demand, and the regulatory environment. When allocations are placed in areas where development is unlikely, it creates a disconnect between planning and outcomes, and that gap ultimately affects affordability and supply. I also want to touch briefly on housing mix. While increasing density is often emphasized as a primary solution, it is only part of the broader housing strategy. A healthy and functional housing market includes a range of options: multifamily, townhomes, and attainable single-family housing. Homeownership remains one of the most effective ways for families to build long-term financial stability, put down roots, and contribute to their communities. Ensuring that our allocations support that full spectrum of housing is essential. In turn, we ask the committee to recognize that the revised allocation was never voted for or approved by the Spokane County Commissioners, and that the local jurisdictions are now utilizing the revised numbers as a basis to update their planning and comprehensive plans. We urge the steering committee to reaffirm the original September 2024 framework. And in doing so, it will better position Spokane County and its cities to meet the housing obligations by aligning responsible growth and affordability. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else up for that? Okay,
So the first person would be Jim Frank.
okay. Jim, go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. I'd like to, I'm of course from Greenstone Corporation. We're a home builder in the Spokane region for 40 years. And I spent the last 3 or 4 years, since I've kind of semi-retired, working with nonprofit housing providers. And I want to reiterate and second everything that the previous speakers have said about the housing allocation and the changes that were made, recommended by PTAC but never adopted, are having a significant negative effect on the ability to meet the housing goals and other countywide planning policies. Those recommendations ended up recommending over 6,000 houses that would be built out in rural Spokane County outside of the UGA. And that's capacity that should be allocated inside the UGA. That significant increase in housing in rural areas is a clear violation of countywide planning policies that you've already adopted. The real important factor here is that any targeted review or reconciliation of these housing allocations that's directed by PTAC will never be successful. The professional planning community, especially in Spokane, has a bias against home ownership. They have a bias for high density apartment development. That's reflected in the land use plans and options that you see coming forward through their preliminary SEPA reviews. Airway Heights, for example, has suggested that the way they can meet their housing allocation is by increasing housing density in industrial and heavy commercial areas along US 2, and building more apartments in that high traffic corridor rather than increasing density in existing residential neighborhoods with better use of middle housing. They limit middle housing to 4 units. They're taking medium density zones and applying low density zoning development regulations to them. So there's this bias. That bias shows up in the city of Spokane housing options that are being proposed. It's a redevelopment, urban arterial, and existing commercial district targeted growth. They don't have a broad-based mixed-use zoning that's going to allow growth of middle housing in all neighborhoods. There's huge equity problems, housing equity problems around all of this. And it's really a failure of the entire process that's happening. The changes, the kinds of processes and the kinds of processes that really neglect public input into this process. The fact that significant changes in the housing allocation can be made with no opportunity for public involvement at all. And there's a very serious question about what housing allocations are being used by anybody. The housing policy document that was presented by the city of Spokane says they're using methodology C. It's saying that they were granted not only housing allocation to meet their population growth, but they were giving a 30% bonus allocation for housing under development, and then another 10% bonus for homeless housing. And at the same time, cities like Airway Heights are being reduced by 20%. Why do not all jurisdictions get a bonus above their population allocation for underproduction of housing? Why is it only going to the city of Spokane? This is all a complete mess, and in my view, a clear violation of the countywide planning policies and a clear violation of state law. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Well, go ahead.
I believe it's Elizabeth Tellison.
Well, sir, what was the name?
Elizabeth Tellison.
Elizabeth, go
Yes.
ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, thanks. Kind of agreeing and echoing a lot of what's already been said, but not to repeat it, focusing on what's being proposed as, I think, an attempt to fix what we're discussing, which is an after the fact reconciliation, an amendment to the policies to allow for that using the Snohomish County model. And the difficulty with doing that at this stage is I don't think any of the jurisdictions, particularly Spokane County, are planning on doing that reconciliation. After the fact or now, it is going to take a lot of work. One of the presumptions within the policy is that each of the jurisdictions will use as one of its alternatives the county adopted numbers. Presently, that is not happening uniformly. Even where some of the county or some of the cities are using the PTAC numbers, they aren't consistent. And to have an after the fact reconciliation really requires that everybody start at least on the same page in one of the alternatives. The rework after the fact is going to require everybody to sit down and start from the same sheet of music. That should be happening now. City of Spokane, City of Airway Heights, Liberty Lake, the Valley, the county, at least need to have one common denominator in their planning analysis so that we have something to go back to and reconcile against. That isn't presently happening. I don't see how adopting a policy that allows kind of the Monday morning quarterback to reanalyze all these issues when most of the jurisdictions think they're going to be done in 2026, and I would suspect are not planning to do a reconciliation after the fact and crack their plans open again and ensure that they align with the county population analysis and allocations. So I would very much encourage all of the jurisdictions, including the county, to start now, take a step back, get on the same page, and then if you want to make some adjustments and there's a basis to do that, whether it is an underdevelopment or a need for additional middle housing or some other sort of accommodation to ensure that we're housing our population, that be reflected in the analysis that's going forward, not everybody picking their own number, marching on along, and then expecting we're going to get back together in 2027 to reanalyze this issue. So I appreciate that Snohomish County does have this plan. They have had this reconciliation model since the mid 90s and have used it and plan to use it when they go through their periodic updates. To adopt this now and expect that it's going to fix what is right now a real problem with the allocations, I think is not wise. I think everybody right now, before these plans get adopted, really should pay attention to what we are trying to accomplish, how we are going to meet the housing needs across our region, and to echo what's been said, in the competition against North Idaho. I am not seeing a lockstep plan. I am not seeing a community effort to really address these housing allocations. And that gives me some concern as a member of this community, as a representative of a number of businesses in this community. So I encourage all of you to kind of hit the pause button, check the allocations. If we're going to do this reconciliation, ensure that we have something to reconcile against and not just planning to kick the can and reopen it for another round of this next year. So thank you all. I know this is hard work and it's not easy. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of effort to put these plans together. So I do understand that. But now is the time to, if we need to take a step back, to do it. So thank you again. And I will leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else online with a hand up? No, anybody else here? Seeing you. Scott, could you speak to some of those concerns that were raised by community members and maybe educate us on?
And it leads into the next item. So everyone, I'm gonna move and stuff. Heard comments that the public is having trouble hearing us here, so I'm gonna pull stuff here. Many of the comments reflect, in one sense, some confusion between setting out the population allocations that then led into the first round of housing unit allocations, taking that step backwards and then restating that with housing allocations that then went into the community allocations. That changed the number of those allocations, in some cases significantly. The Commerce, at the time, none of us anywhere in the 26 class knew exactly how that algorithm worked. We were using a tool from Commerce called the HAP, which you've seen many times. And that, as we got to understanding where those confusions were, Commerce was gracious enough to send us a version of that that is unlocked. And so on the county side, we are trying to backfill and understand better how that particular tool works. In the broader sense, this body and the PTAC will remember in 23 and 24, when we started this allocation using the OFM 22 numbers, there was going to be a first round of population and housing allocations, after which the communities would go through their initial round of balancing their land capacity analysis with these order of magnitude capital facilities and other analysis, and then there was presumed to be a second round or a refinement of those allocations. When the HAPT tool came into being, we all took a long time to understand that. You remember HAPT version A, B, C, and we ultimately ended up with something we called A prime. That took more than a year. What that did is it kind of took away the original timeline for doing that second allocation. That led the county to pursue the reconciliation process because we're uncomfortable with those allocations as they currently stand, and we want to be able to use a GMA sanctioned tool to revisit them at some appropriate time. Is there time to do that now? In one case, one of the speakers said, well, better now than later. But the fact is, so many of these communities have gone down the path. They've published an EIS based on that initiation. If we were to go back and reopen that, it would be a significant workload and it would be a significant added expense. And so therefore, the reconciliation process gives us a chance to say, all right, we missed that window of restating these. Let's go forward, let's see what that is, and then what we're going to talk about just a minute, how are we going to balance that? And then perhaps go back and reconcile those in 27 or 28. So the county shares these concerns, county planning shares these concerns, and I think we've brought that forward to our planning commission and to our commissioners in briefings, and stating that we believe we really need to take a fresh look at these as we go forward. One of the key elements that's happened fairly recently is the city has published its DEIS and received comments on that. Our comments, like many others, were we understand what you're doing, but we can't yet see the empirical data that support these alternatives, and we're looking for them, specifically since they haven't published EAS, to say, tell us now where your preferred alternative is going to go and show us how this fits your capacity and fits your ability to serve them. Those tools will also give us a sense of how's this allocation really going to happen. Oh, Rowan, I'm sorry.
Larry Bowman would like to speak.
Okay, Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, Airway Heights has been brought up a couple times, and for those that don't know me, I'm the mayor out here of Airway Heights. And I just want to say that, we would actually like to see lower numbers and less constraints on the city, only based on the fact that we are uniquely placed with Fairchild Air Force Base, the airport, 2 tribal entities, and then we have a JLUS and flight restrictions or density restrictions on the south side of Highway 2. So being that we are very unique and being that we are in a unique spot, especially with our water issues that we've had recently and whatnot, we have dug very, very deep into our numbers and into our issues that we have and the constraints that we currently have. And our numbers are very fair. And our numbers that we put out, we think that we have a real feasibility to get to. So I would love to know at any point, where can we grow? And what else can we do as a city to actually ensure that we have responsible growth in the West Plains while also trying to increase our infrastructure and do whatever we can to protect Fairchild and elsewhere. So that's the only comment I have on that.
Thank you, Larry. Anybody else? Sorry, you have more to finish on?
I think I could go into the
Yeah,
reconciliation
go ahead.
part, and that would kind of lead to these questions.
Yeah, not very.
I want to recap, like. I'm not sure what this question is getting at on some of this, but the baseline numbers of state consent, this allocation discussion is just about where, which jurisdictions take on how much housing units. So it's going from, like, you explain population to housing units, and we adopted a methodology, we didn't adopt necessarily numbers. So I'm not sure what I was being when you say that we're differentiated. When we have adopted, when we didn't, in 2024, we adopted that, what was it, a crime, right? Pretty much see. That's what we adopted, and we are using that methodology. And to Mr. Frank's point, we are working on, better mixed use development, so we should see that come soon. And we are doing all that hard work, but we are pretty advanced into this process, so you're certainly not gonna support going back and redoing all of this, but we definitely want to do it right. I understand your Airway Heights concerns. So perhaps a workshop with both CFAS and us might help with that, so that we have staff really explaining what we're doing, because I feel like sometimes we're sitting here second guessing staff are not at the table to explain what's going on. We're not having that direct communication. But yes, that zoning is definitely coming and needed. But as far as the allocation, we're still dealing with snake baseline number, and we are using methodology for that.
So my question, I mean, we spent better part of a year debating these HAPs, method A, method B. My recollection, if I remember correctly, was we looked at if there was a C that we thought could sort of hold up to scrutiny from commerce, some sort of hybrid, but I thought we had decided there wasn't a C, so we just slightly tweaked A to make A prime. I guess my question is, so did not every jurisdiction use A prime then? Is that what folks are saying? That some jurisdiction, that not each jurisdiction, we didn't all use the same method. Is that what I'm understanding?
Commissioner, I don't know that I can answer that directly. The Board of County Commissioners did adopt A prime in January of 25 with the goal of saying this is the methodology that everyone should use. So the presumption was they all used the same methodology.
But I mean, based on emails, based on public testimony today, what I'm hearing is not everybody used A prime. Is that an accurate statement? Is that what happened? Did other folks use some other methodology? And if so, it's like, why did we spend most of a year debating on methods? If
We will
use them.
We will survey our numbers and find out, but our presumption was by the county board adopting it, they did use it. If we could, Melissa from Commerce.
I can try to take us out of things like that. And please correct me if I was.
If possible, that you're back there.
Yeah, the big room. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Alafai-Tooley. I'm the senior planner on the Eastern Regional team, working with Spokane County and some other neighboring jurisdictions. And I will attempt to kind of lay out what happened. When Spokane County initially was discussing which HAP methodology to use, there were two offered in our guidance, A and B. There was always an option to do your own methodology. And so that's what was being referred to as C at that time. But kind of during those discussions, Commerce went back and worked with the consultant to develop a third alternative, which looked more closely at separating out the unincorporated UGA and the rural areas, because the other methodologies can look so closely at the rural areas. And so so during your discussions, Commerce came out with a new method C. And that is what you all, I believe, decided to go with. But because you had been referring to method C as this kind of made up alternative that you created, I think the county discussed this methodology that Commerce had come up with as A prime. So A prime matches methodology C in the Commerce guidance now. So I think that's where the confusion was. And Tyrell, am I describing this, or Scott, am I describing this more or less correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
So my original question then, I guess, so is, did every jurisdiction use that same methodology?
I believe so. That's a question, I think, for the county and the PTAC, but yeah.
Assuming you easily look at the LQAs and see, great, that'd be pretty obvious.
Mr. Chair, there's very little, anything obvious in the growth map.
That's fair.
That's, yeah, we've been through a process that we can go back and reconstruct, at least look at how we used our services, and Joel's been there.
I think we have a serious issue with that, the state stuff, but. You know, so the vote taken, there was never a discussion, never public comment taken on this discussion, if that was decided back up. Or not voted on by this committee, documented, change of what we're doing, or by the county committee. So I would say that we have a potential legal issue, but it's particularly relevant to the Spokane County. If this wasn't brought up for a vote, it would change maybe a lot possible.
Joel, I don't need to disagree, but when in 2024, when PTAC was working on this and making presentations to this committee, every one of these meetings had public testimony. This committee made a recommendation, a formal recommendation to the board for adoption of the methodology, which the board did in January 2025. So there's a base record of public participation and discussion that got us to here. What's happened since is that not just the county, but in conversations with the city and the city of the valley, we all look at this HAP tool and go, we don't know how the algorithm worked, and we're not quite sure it's really accurate. Hence, the reconciliation say, well, we're too far down the road, and this is a practical thing that you know, as Klinsky mentioned. We've made a lot of decisions so far, and we may have to go forward to meet our statutory deadlines with what we've done. But we need a tool that we can go back and rethink these things in a more accurate way. So.
I'm not a voting member, I'm just saying, whether it's something we didn't understand, and then come back and clarify.
Well, and I think, yeah, real quick, I think Dr. Klinsky made a good point though, about maybe a conversation with our PTAC members. And so perhaps we could make a workshop specific to that at the next meeting. I think that would be
We could do that. Sure. Either come up or speak loudly, please.
Another point of clarification is when the county adopted the act, that adopted following the steering committee's recommendation, attached to that document was the incorrect. The table, it has the numbers that, as far as I learned, every jurisdiction is in January 2025 back in the so there may be also a clerical error added.
Understood.
Scott, could you speak to that? Was that something presented to us that was in error? Or did we see the actual correct version?
We're in trying to reconstruct this in a document that was appended to the resolution adopting HAP A prime. There was a table, there were two tables, one of which was the population allocation, the other was supposed to be the housing allocation, but it was the same population table put in there twice. And so we're staging, as we go back to our board, we're going back and saying, look, either we need to amend this resolution to reflect this other table, or we need to rethink what we're doing. So if it is it doesn't change the methodology, but the supporting document was incomplete.
Okay, all right. Really fast before, is there anybody else comment? We got a little more public comment, and then Brony, you said there's somebody online as well.
Yes, Jim Franklin.
Okay, we'll go to Jim and Isaiah if you want to come up, next.
Well. You have them, you want me to start?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Joe.
The, in the lead up to January of 25, PTAC and the steering committee looked at several different housing allocation methodologies. And method A, B, and C were all considered. And if you go back and look at the documentation, you'll see that method C was rejected by PTAC and the SEO for various reasons. Method A was selected, and method A, under Commerce guidance, is a method that allocates housing by population, by your population allocation. So it's a population-based allocation. Method C is different. Method C allows you to take the income bands that are prepared by HAP, 0 to 30%, 30 to 60%, 60 to 80, and so forth. It allows those bands to be sub-allocated. So they don't have to be allocated uniformly to every district based on population. You could look at various reasons why you might want to sub-allocate population to different jurisdictions. For example, you could say that the 0 to 30 population is better served by the city of Spokane. Therefore, we'll go ahead and allocate them a larger share of that allocation than we will other jurisdictions. So there was differences in these methodologies and the basis of those methodologies. That is what happened. That is what changed when PTAC did the original allocation. It was essentially based on population. So jurisdictions got their share of the population allocation. When you go to method C, that is a different method. Nobody understood that method C and method A prime were the same. Method A prime was intended to deal with some issues related to rural Spokane County and in unincorporated Spokane County rural areas. No one understood that there were going to be these other allocations made as part of that were based on something other than population. And so this has been a very misleading process that the public has not had any ability to participate in. And I really believe that what you're doing has violated the entire intent of having a process that's open and shared by the public. Thank you.
Mayor Cooper.
Yeah, good morning. Want to speak for the rural area here in the West Plains that, it has been a long and arduous process. I agree with Scott Chessie's analysis that it took us a year. We went through a lot of things, but there's also a lot of truth in that nobody understood the HAPT. It never made sense. It was a driver for really not population, but for now really those underserved populations and creating low income housing and density. And that was the focus, that was the purpose. And it didn't make sense. And so we struggled a lot, which is why it took a year and we had all those different A, B, C. I wasn't present, and forgive me, I was in Olympia during January. I missed that meeting. I had staff attend that. And so I'm just catching up, but I just want to reiterate that I understand the concerns that have been raised today. I would support the idea of having another conversation if you are so inclined to kind of look at that reconciliation, and maybe we can understand better. And maybe everyone else does, forgive me, but understand better commerce, that prime A, and what that really means for us. And I think it's changed too since the millionaire's tax. We're driving more wealth out of the area. And so we can't sustain on low income housing only. So anyway, just wanted to give my 2 cents. We did follow, we were part of it all along the way, and, adopted the methodology together with the group, right up until January. And so, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll go to Isaiah and then we'll hold on public comment on this one.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that because admittedly this process is so opaque with the HAP tool, all we have is the data that it spits out. And so for us to say that, oh, well, there is a clerical error in the table that was submitted and it's okay, we can just change it. Well, that table and that data is the only information that we have to make a decision. So we made a decision based on bad data. That's not a good thing. And I'll remind you too that the PTAC recommendation, not clerical error fix, but recommended change happened subsequent to the county board vote. So there's a recommended change that was not voted on by this body. And I am happy to document our organization, Spokane Home Builders, reaching out repeatedly beginning last summer saying, hey, which allocation are we going with? Is it population or is it by housing type with this recommendation? And still today, we don't have a clear answer. That's not good. We need good data to make good decisions. And we all know how this process has gone, how litigious it was 10 years ago. So let's get it right now. We have the ability, we have the time to get it right now. Let's do the process correctly so we can all leave here feeling good that we made good decisions based on the same data set that we're all looking at. So that's our ask for you. Thanks.
Scott, you want to finish up? And of course, if there's any comments from steering committee.
Yes. Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. All of this points to the need to adjust. This committee can make a recommendation to the board of county commissioners on a pause, on a restatement, or on the reconciliation process. Let me go through that where we are today. This group asked for some more detail at this meeting from your last meeting, and we've got some basics for you to consider. What we will do is take this and any condition or any more comment that comes from you and the public, and we will bring this back for a redo or a revisit at your May meeting. And in the meantime, we'll also be briefing our Board of County Commissioners and our Planning Commission. So 3 key elements that have to happen in this. You can see here, they're pretty straightforward. And then, kind of a 5-step process that we've identified to move this forward. And you can see, as was mentioned before, it is heavy on collaboration. While the adoption of the countywide planning policies is being, in a sense, sponsored by Spokane County, the process that's envisioned is a fully collaborative process with all of the communities being part of it and working to go forward. So, 3 things. The collaboration is in the start, putting this, into the countywide planning policy so that it has roots there. And then number 3 is where we would start our rethinking to look at how do these data fit into the land capacity analysis, how they fit into the concurrency analysis, and therefore going forward. And then you can see steering committee, Board of County Commissioners, public hearings to share those findings in a way that satisfy our and the county board's adopted public participation policy, which we did in 22 to drive the entire 26 process. And then after that is local side of that going forward. What we included in your packet for today was a 2-page memo that introduces the kind of the foundations for what this reconciliation is supposed to do. And it's in this case, it's more of monitoring that growth and trying to understand it. So, this is the first part of that. These results will be put in an appendix. We'll look at where they're going. And I'll go through these fairly quickly because they are in the packet and posted on our web. We will look at, forecasted, estimated development trends, all of these particular issues. The review and allocation part of this, getting into, again, the very same things that we have done, but with more specificity and more detail. And so these are the key elements, and then we put it into those allocations. So what we will be proposing to you is a version of this approach as the precursor to what would be the reconciliation. And then a reconciliation part of it that would be a county-wide planning policy amendment that we will have for you in more detail based on comments we received from you, from PTAC and others between now and May.
A couple things,
If you could speak up.
we did, I think, as a group on the steering committee in 2024, have an understanding what we're talking about when we did about this process. I think none of us thought it was perfect, and that we would have to run through it to see how it works out. But the A prime thing, all of the choices are about housing. I just want to say that they're not about straight population. They never were. The A prime is just kind of the reconciliation. We did discuss C, but at the time that we were talking about C, we were kind of asking staff, it was too young planners, to reinvent the wheel for us. And it got to cumbersome, and then we could agree on what it was. That's why we chose A prime. And the charts that were in front of us were not adopted. So there's a perception of it, blindly adopted something that we hadn't seen that's not accurate, but what is true is that the wrong chart was put on the resolution. So I hope that clears things up a little bit. These meetings are recorded, right? Good folks, if you go back and watch the tapes, if they're so interested, but I think moving forward, that is what we adopted. I think that's what bus jurisdictions are using. And we're looking at this process, I think partially because we know that this is a brand new concept that we're all dealing with. And may or may not be for something else, but.
I say in. I'm just but the city's on documentation after the vote for the option C. There's no reference that I think that probably part of the confusion the county approved option A prime. Because everybody should have been planning on option A prime, there was no reference to option C, which causing problems. So I think a lot of this is I have that document, so I said that's my point. I don't think it was clarity to the public or what happened.
I want to just speak up more clearly. I've got a sleeping can't hear you.
Okay. Chief Gerard, I'll put you on the spot. Is there anything that you can share? I mean, obviously, we can hold that for the next meeting. We discuss this further, but is there anything about the option C issue that you'll raise that you can share? Okay. Commissioner Kearns, do you have a hand?
So I guess my question is the rub here that A prime is Commerce's C?
Yeah.
So did the city use A prime? They're just calling A prime C because Commerce's C matches A prime. Is that and I pulled up the resolution here in the county's resolution tracker, and it's the same table got copy and pasted twice on there. But did each jurisdiction use the correct numbers? I mean, maybe they called it C instead of calling it A prime, but A prime isn't our C, but it is Commerce's C. Yes, the same table got put on there twice, but there are real numbers in a table that just wasn't copy and pasted onto the resolution. Did all of the jurisdictions use the correct numbers? I mean, because if all that checks out, then I think we're good. There's just kind of a communication roadblock here that seems like doesn't seem insurmountable to me. But I guess we need to know, were all of those things done correctly at the end? If they were, great. If they weren't, then it sounds like we have a bit of a problem. So.
Commissioner, like I said, our presumption is yes, every jurisdiction used the accurate or adopted A prime housing allocation numbers. We will verify it. We will confirm that. It was simply a presumption of us. The challenge, I think that others have expressed here though is trying to reconcile the confusion between the original allocation, forgetting that the HAP tool is used for both of these issues, but when it was first used and population allocations were the input that generated housing units versus the second go around where population was converted to housing units and the housing units were the input to create the housing allocations. Sorry, it sounds circular, but there was a very, very different allocation of housing units based on the input. The county UGA portion went down substantially, the city portion went up substantially. The argument of, well, 10% of this was for homeless population, and that's a little bit obtuse because it doesn't necessarily mean living on the street population. It more refers to institutional populations that are in hospitals, prisons, dormitories, and so at Airway Heights, they have a prison population. That population, for better or worse, is not looking for independent housing. And so their allocations would be less under that circumstance. Medical Lake, on the other hand, also has Eastern Washington Hospitals, which you would think another institutional use, but their allocation went up in the HAP in the second version of this. That led all of us to go, well, what's happening behind the scenes? Why can't we deconstruct this so we know how these allocations are being made? And so it's really that level of confusion from the first version to the second version of it. If you simply went from population to housing, how come these numbers changed so dramatically? And that's what we're trying to still back out.
Or is there a steering committee member to handle?
Mayor Cooper did have her hand up, but she has made a note in the chat that she has confirmed with staff that the new numbers adopted in January are not the numbers that were to date. And then Kevin Frybot did make comment that the city used the 8. So that was another comment.
The A prime.
Yes.
Okay. But Mayor
Now
Cooper.
he has his hand raised.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, just to make it absolutely clear, we used what the county called A prime. That name A prime came out of Bongo and staff's discussions because it's a mix of A and a little bit of C. But not to get too far in the weeds, we used A prime. We called it C in the report because this tool evolved over time. The guidance evolved over time. It's now kind of what Commerce calls C. So just to erase any confusion, we used the A prime method that was adopted by BOCC. We used the same table that I believe most everyone or everyone else used that was given the input housing share of growth, not population share of growth. And if it would help, I can put that great big huge annoying table up on the screen, but I just wanted to be clear. We used the numbers that we understood was using the A prime method.
And then I just want to refer, so Mayor Cooper says they were using different numbers.
That is correct.
Okay,
She is now raised her hand.
okay, Mayor Cooper, go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. So the number isn't that different for us. And so, but the number that was adopted, we looked at all of the charts and all the graphs and believed that the number that we were using was the number that came out of this group. But when I confirm with staff, they're saying the table that was adopted in January are not the numbers that we have been using, and we've been tracking along and participated in both the advisory group and this group. And so I'm not sure what went wrong, and but we did not use that that same table according to staff. So anyway, would love to see just a meeting on this reconciliation part so we can maybe talk about this specifically, and then from there, as Scott indicated, if anything needs to go back to the county commissioners, if it was just an error in a table or there, so I would love to take just one fresh look at just that issue. Was it the right table or not? Did some of us fall off along the way or not? And are we all in agreement And do we understand that commerce happened? It seems the algorithm changed, and I would agree that it was difficult to follow. These are the numbers that we're going to agree to, but now that it changed, and it seems that algorithm may have changed. I would just like to understand, did it change or not? Did the outcome change because what the tap changed, or a table changed, or they combined a methodology that was A and a little bit of C, and now we call it A prime, and that's different than the A prime we thought we were working with. So I would just love to have a meeting to really take a deeper dive on that and look back at the historical documents, get it aligned, and see if that's really what went to the Board of County Commissioners, and is it what was supposed to go? And then we can align from there, as someone said earlier, that we can have an understanding of that we have an agreed method for the county that we can all work forward from together.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just throw out there, I agree. I mean, I think just the flurry of very comments and fusion and inconsistencies. So, you know, we really do need to have that robust kind of workshop discussion, but I would suggest perhaps May 20 is too late. And I wonder if maybe we can have just a special meeting that's just for that purpose in April. That can be a little bit more technical focused and in the weeds of it. I don't know if we need a motion or anything like that, but if there's no opposition to that, work with staff to get that scheduled. But I think that would be a good idea. So I'll put that up.
Mr. Chair, we are happy to survey all of the members immediately for a couple of possible dates on a Wednesday in April.
Sounds great. Okay. With that, and knowing that we'll be able to have a lot more time on this, why don't we go ahead and move on to the next planning policy. Or if there's more to finish up, we'll do that and then we'll go on for it.
There's so much more. I agree. We probably good to come back in April to do that. Commissioner French is not here today, so I will run through some of this on his behalf, but Kitty and other members of the subcommittee are welcome to chime in on this. Again, we had the red line document of countywide planning policies for housing in your packets. We also included email comments directly from Ms. Klinsky and Commissioner Waldrop. The red line comments, if you weren't able to see them, the origin on them on your document, most of that came from Jim Frank as his initial suggestion that the subcommittee used for their discussions most recently on March 6th. So a couple of things, you know, the overview part of this didn't change very much. There was some language to kind of change how affordable housing was considered in here. And how the jurisdictions would work, and these were comments put on. What we're not showing on this are the specific comments that were submitted, and those again were in your packet, and I would welcome any annotation from Commissioner Waldrop if she was online. I don't think she is, and Councilmember Klinsky. But it was to, you know, try to, the emphasis as I saw this was to try to have a stronger emphasis on home ownership in the countywide planning policy, basically put, to highlight the need for affordability as a benchmark tool, and then to get to, you know, the idea of how do you make that happen. One of which the Commissioner French threw out a number, you know, 70% owner occupied housing. A couple of our meeting ago, the subcommittee at least considered that it would move to let's see if we got it. Look at this. Changing that from a hard number into a moving average that is per jurisdiction based on a 5 or 10 year. The initial draft said 5. I think the committee recommended a 10-year moving average of owner occupancy in each specific community. And then if that was not met, that would set up a series of annual reports to you that would trigger request to that community to come up with a 2-year plan to rebuild back to that standard. And I guess I would leave it at that, and ask, Councilmember Flitzky, who may be the only one who was on the, Josh was there too, I'm sorry.
I was on the first call, but I did a second, so.
So, anybody can add if I didn't add enough detail.
I'll just say, like, the very first draft, it's pretty good at workable, but very drafty. And I think where it took us is places we're not ready to go yet in the discussion. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but this needs a lot of work. This work is implementable, especially this last part here. We haven't developed, I think, good, what is the right word? I don't know, benchmarks for what is to be when we say owner occupancy. We don't have a definition of that yet. I think this is workable, but I think it's also worth noting that our owner occupancy, like ownership rate, has not changed much in the past 10 years. It's always been in the 1% area. So we're not at an urgent place as far as things fluctuating in real time. So I feel like we do have time to work on this and make it better. But when we say annual owner occupancy status, we haven't even defined, do we mean households, like per household, per unit? We don't have those kinds of things fleshed out yet. And I think this would also be another thing where it'd be worth a joint workshop with the PTAC. But I think it's less urgent than the previous one we were talking about, because this isn't an issue that's volatile right now in Spokane, but it could become, and it's definitely a worth goal.
Is there somebody over here?
Amber.
Okay, Commissioner Walter.
Oh, thank you. No, I just wanted to add in that I thought what Councilmember Klitsky said was good. I think there's some really good additions to try to bolster more home ownership that we worked on as a subcommittee. I do still think that a workshop or digging into what is the goal and how you might actually move the needle is worthwhile. The same thing with the county. The county's homeownership numbers have basically remained the same over 10 years. And so to create any kind of major change, I think we just need to dig into that a little bit more. Like what, I think some of the stuff that was added is good, but I think I'd like a little bit more time to dig into that and figure out, well, what would need to change. A lot of that will be in the development regulations and not necessarily in the planning policies. So those are just some of my comments.
So I would say, I agree somewhat, some of the numbers, you may say 1%, 2%, doesn't seem like that's a significant decline when you see those numbers. The other issue is I track and monitor housing permits regularly, and we're seeing significant uptake in multifamily, which in Spokane are all, especially city of Spokane, are heavy to older, not owner occupied, and very little single family owner occupied opportunity. So that's not being sort of community. So I think something we should be watching. If we may not see it all happening now, but it is on a slope, and I just want to get it drop or to get a lower fee for it to become the facto, especially with the new rules we're putting in place. I think we're saying very well up for some of these issues, but a lot more going back to a conversation with these housing population.
I just wanted to look quick comment here, it was a related response to Councilmember Klitsky's, is that, yes, we've not seen a huge percentage change, but I would also argue that there hasn't been both enough changes in land use and development code to make it more feasible to build peaceable housing. And where we have, we've not seen quite as much uptake. I asked our planning staff for our development services center to give me a number on infill middle housing specifically, And the vast majority of what we've seen in 2 years have been duplexes, which was not necessarily the intent of BOGO, which I pushed really hard for. It was really more fourplexes and possibly even 6. But the total number of units in 2 years is 176. So with being that and the major obstacles to condo development still remain, it just seems like there is, and then the downward slide of single family homes, it just seems like we're sort of we've set ourselves up in a spot where we're not seeing enough development that would be owner occupied options. And so of course, we're not going to see a change in those percentages too.
I agree with you, especially on the sample stuff, but just to be clear, I think it almost 23%. But you look at, prior to the cancer, it's like, and we're in line with state national trends. But I do want to point out, like, if we do something like this, we have a hard goal, we would be the only jurisdiction in the state doing that, and that this conversation is mostly about, like, population allocation and zoning. So zoning is agnostic about ownership. So there's only so many tools that we have to move this. So I think we need to really understand we're doing for the mix to stuff and find some really effective ways to do it and real effective ways to measure change and trends, kind of like determining. We're not talking about that goal, but it's all worthy stuff. But we're going into uncharted territories, and people should be doing a really good job and being a good example of that if we can do that. And I will mention before, like, some of the problems with ownership, especially when we're talking about like more unique ways of planning and ways of building housing, is the funding side. So I think it would behoove us all to try to understand more and influence that side against one too. Because the more innovative your housing project is, the harder it is to get done. And that is something that we need to deal with. We also need to deal with our condo ownership and insurance rules in the state. So those are two big things that also need to be done.
Okay, one last point. The challenge we have in Spokane County is also happened with County as well. You can talk about the statewide, yes, you're correct. We're the one that have a unique border issue that you saw from the numbers that Mr. Watkins shared, that we're seeing a rapid push to North Idaho, and so that's affecting our road in Spokane. I would say that's why I think this is important. Now, I mean, yeah, but this is, I think we're not focusing on this and actually taking action, creating action for that. All of this, which all from behind our conversation.
Strictly on that,
And is the document that's in our packet, refresh my, any changes to this from the last subcommittee group? Yeah. Or is this the same document we looked at the last subcommittee?
The document itself reflects only two specific changes. One was to more specifically mention condominiums. The other was to move to a 10-year cycle. But there are a number of comments from Councilmember Footsby and Commissioner Waldrop that were sent as comments that are not incorporated in the document. They're traveling alongside.
Okay, because if I remember correctly, on that final subcommittee group we were on, we seemed to have pretty unanimous support for the document for review. Nobody seemed to raise concerns.
But lack of, it's some right, there's a lot of changes, and now I've seen that last.
The last thing about the.
Yeah, I don't know if it has the comments, we're seeing what we want to see.
I have a red line version that was on it, and I think that's what we did when we did a screen share. It was a red line version, so Apple would change what it's on, user zero or user.
Oh, we're the next stage, we don't have this perception. But however, we also did, we did not even written down, like, I don't want to keep the perception. Well, that was.
It was an average of the last.
Yes, about it.
Yes. But I mean, nobody raised any concerns in that either, because it seemed to have I think what you said was even like, yeah, I like this, I can get behind this. This is a big change from where we were in the subcommittee group. So where everybody kind of gave a thumbs up and said, this looks good. I mean, that was my recollection. I mean, other folks that were on the call.
Well, and to your point, I agree with what you're saying, that if you haven't seen the information or talked about it, it's also extremely. That's my take. And as Scott said, the other people in your average, instead of requiring your independent, but it's people average, between their more accountability and more accountability. And that's why we would like to go if we didn't agree on. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I just don't think that was ready for adoption.
Well, obviously, we're not adopting it today and perhaps not even in May, but given that there is 2 months, could at least this version, or if there is another subcommittee meeting following that, could we send that to PTAC specifically asking for some comment back?
I would certainly think that the subcommittee was clearly sending it forward for your broader comments today and hearing that. I would expect Commissioner French would reconvene that subcommittee at some earliest convenience, take what was said today into account and produce a further draft that could come back. And if that was done in between, we might be able to put that on that April agenda because it does sort of relate to what we're still talking about. And we can also get it to PTAC in time for some planning analysis ahead of that. So I think the timing is fine.
I think sending it to PTAC was something that Councilmember Klitzky said, and I think we were all supportive of that. We'd love to get their input. Thoughts on it. So I think we'll.
Roderick, so do we have? Okay. Everyone?
Yeah, I know that there was on the 11th, there was supposed to be recommendations from the subcommittee or an initial document that was to be sent out. I never received a copy of it. I don't know if the PTAC in itself got a copy of it, but I would just ask in moving forward that any recommendations from any subcommittees just be forwarded to the entire body.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Walker, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to concur with Commissioner Kearns that I would like to get the feedback from the PTAC. And so that would be great. Are they meeting soon so they could review comments and the drafts that were reviewed by the subcommittee?
Yeah, I think that'd be ideal. That's the plan, hopefully. So.
Okay, so they're meeting this month.
The subcommittee, I don't know if there's a schedule.
No, I meant the PTAC. The PTAC will be meeting soon. That's what I was asking. Could they review and give feedback back to this group, like which is our normal process?
The next meeting of PTAC will be the first Wednesday in April. Right.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to support putting this on their agenda to review and give us feedback. So thank you.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Carol.
If you could clarify that second meetings for review, are you asking? Because we have not seen, I believe, either one of the proposals. We have not made recommendation on reconciliation idea or this changes to the housing. So that might be helpful.
Yes, they will both go.
There's so much confusion about all these issues. And
Correct.
if you're for presentation, special meeting, that would be like
It was certainly our thought that both of these would go to PTAC after this meeting with the comments from the steering committee and public, but then provide PTAC with a better foundation for study and evaluation. So they'll go up.
And I think it'd be important that PTAC is part of the presentation and discussion in that workshop too, just to hear those technical perspectives.
Yeah, commission, is that, can that be made or is that available to the public? It seems like with A prime and C and population table presented and population table operated under, there's a lot of not only decisions being made, fusion happening, and some spotlight and openness for public with the PTAC meeting would be a request made before, but it seems like as we've been talking about the issues that have come up, you know, some sunlight on that group might be useful. Is that something that can be available?
Documents that are
are shared with the steering committee are all posted on the county planning website, including all of these. PTAC is a staff group. It is not a public body, and so it takes its own notes. But the documents that go to it, if they're coming from the steering committee, will also be posted on the website. So yes, we will have the chance for public comment to inform PTAC.
But not, the meeting itself is not an open public.
That's correct.
Okay, but we will hear from PTAC at the April meeting. So,
But if we do a separate workshop, that would be a public meeting.
yeah, that's exactly.
That's, you know.
Yeah.
Right. That would,
We'll hear from PTAC.
that would be your workshop, and that would be noticed, and that would be open to the public, as well as the ability of the chair to take public comments.
Scott, is there any further on this or?
For today, no.
Well,
Yeah.
anything else? No. Okay, anything else from the steering committee on this then? All right, so why don't we go ahead and get the legislative.
We'll just do this quickly. It affects, some places, both city and county. Some of these slides are in your packet, so I won't go through them. We're running later than usual. But these are 5 that relate specifically to housing. Code requirements for ADUs, unit lot, parking requirements, supportive housing type and co-living. These are now session laws that all of us in some degree have to adapt into our existing codes. The county is working on this as a parallel process with updating our development code to implement 26 plan update for more, 2046 plan update. So it's going forward. There's one other that did make it through that is sort of disturbing or challenging for all of us. Senate Bill 6023 or 6026. Yeah, it was one that prohibits the requirement for ground floor retail in mixed use areas as a condition of residential development. This was very contentious from both the city association and Wasatch County Association. Counties and the small towns within the counties were challenged. It's like they work very hard to maintain a Main Street atmosphere with having small shops on the street front and potentially residential above. And this original bill would prohibit any restrictions or prohibit any requirements for retail. Instead, you would have to use those storefronts for residential. There were some modifications to it. Among others, it was not applied to rural counties. It was ultimately not applied to cities under 30,000. But it does apply to Spokane County, and it does apply to urban growth areas that are contiguous with or coterminous with cities over 30,000. And that, of course, is our metro core. So this does affect the county side of where this is going in that. And there are still some exclusions through it, but they require quite a lot of extra analysis. So that's one that we didn't highlight here, but came through the legislature that did pass. And we're going to have to deal with that. And it directly affects how we want to do the neighborhood zoning, neighborhood residential, neighborhood business zoning, which is a mixed use that has storefront retail and other things. So the county's taking a deep look at this. But it will also affect, how we think about our joint work with our 2 biggest cities.
So the state is not harder to go over.
Yeah, that for sure. The legislature acting as a state planning commission.
Comments, sharing anything on this or other items up here? Is there anything else to go over with these bills?
No, not in any detail, Mr. Chairman.
Any steering committee members?
And there was some supplementary information that was submitted to everybody ahead of time and is also posted on our web if you want to look at other details.
Very good. Okay, so with that, I think the only item left is to take up our minutes. So I will look for a motion to adopt the February 11th, 2026 minutes, unless there are opposed. Motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, all in favor of adopting those minutes, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstaining? Okay, that passes. Anything for the good of the order from anybody on the steering committee? Anyone online? Not seeing, not hearing, Scott?
Just for kind of a personal comment. Thank you for a good discussion. Thank you for digging into a couple of things that you didn't anticipate necessarily having to handle at this point of the year. So I appreciate everybody really taking this seriously and helping us as vendors ultimately bring something back, all of you. So thank you for that.
All right. Well, with that, thank you, everybody, and we will call this adjourned at 10:35.
Please watch your calendars for, I'll say on the date, as somebody after the meeting. You know, it's a, we're trying.